that time. Now, two men in the last century, one named Sir David Dalrymple and the other Dr. Jean Burgon. These two men have spent their whole life going all over the world amalgamating all these what we call early church fathers quotations of the biblical text. And guess how many they come up with?
How many?
86,000.
Wow.
They have found 86,000 quotations from the early church fathers' letters.
Wow.
They went one step further. They wanted to find out, Dr. Jean Burgon wanted to find out how many of these quotations predated the 4th century. How many of them predated the Sinaiticus that we have in the British Library, the Alexandrinus that we have in the British Library, the Vaticanus that is in Rome. How many of these predated the Council of Nicaea, when many Muslims claim that's when our Bible was put together, in 325 by Constantine. So he just looked at those quotations that predated the 4th century. People like Ignatius, Irenaeus, Pappus, people like Polycarp, Athanasius. These are the earliest church fathers. Just looking at their quotations, guess how many quotations he came up with?
I don't know how many.
36,000.
Wow.
36,000 quotations, all predating the 4th century. That's 300 years before the Quran. They wanted to go one step further. They wanted to see how much of the New Testament these early church fathers' quotations incorporated. So they put them in chronological order from Matthew all the way to Revelation. And guess what they found? They found with just these 36,000 quotations from before the 4th century, they could reproduce the entire New Testament except for 11 verses. Ooh,
Wow.
I hope you're surprised.
Yeah, I'm blown away, yeah.
Because stop and think the significance of what I've just said.
Yeah.
They could reproduce all 27 books of the New Testament, all of them.
Just through the correspondence, the letters to each other.
Just from these quotations.
Wow.
There are plenty of do's and don'ts, and the biggest do's and don'ts have to do with citing other apologists where you haven't really studied and gotten your facts straight. I'm embarrassed to say that sometimes there are Muslim apologists who have done really decent research on the nature of the New Testament or on the transmission of the text or things along those lines, and they have cleared up kind of an apocryphal story that Christians believed in. There's one, for example, a story about a number of scholars have passed on saying someone had pointed out that in the first 3 centuries of Christianity, only 11 verses out of the entire New Testament had not been able to be found in those church fathers' writings. Well, that was a garbled story that went back to the early 1800s, and it was a third-hand story of a fellow by the name of David Dalrymple. He was the one who actually was doing the research, and somebody heard about this at a party, and not directly from Dalrymple, but from somebody else, and then put it into a book, and it's been stated for the last 200 years as though it's gospel fact. What Dalrymple actually said was, in the first 2 centuries of the Christian faith, through AD 300, that all but 11 verses of John's gospel had been found in the church fathers' writings. He wasn't talking about the whole New Testament. And so this got communicated in such a way that said it was the whole New Testament that's been found. Well, that's just irresponsible and not at all helpful. And it was Muslim apologists who discovered the error. And it's been quoted by apologists, even text-critical scholars, and it was some Muslims who did research and said, sorry, that's not the case. Well, I don't like to see us getting embarrassed by that, and that's why we need to be very serious students and never afraid to really ask the tough questions.